nothing but the truth. You can run, but you can't hide. That was the warning the Jammu and Kashmir police posted on X at 6:10 p.m. on November 10th, and it was aimed at a man they believed they were about to capture. The message was for 32-year-old Dr. Umar Nabi, a doctor at Al Falah Hospital in Faridabad, who was part of a terror module consisting of doctors like him who had planned to carry out bomb attacks in major cities, including Delhi, which is India's capital city. What the police didn't know then was that even as that message went up, which they put up, Umar was already driving around Delhi in a white Hyundai i20 packed with explosives and headed towards one of the most iconic locations in India, the Red Fort. Welcome to this episode of Nothing But the Truth. I am Raj Chengappa of India Today, and today we're going to talk about the Delhi car bomb blast near the Red Fort, not just as a one-off terror incident, but as a grim marker of a new threat of what is called white-collar terrorism, a phrase where educated professionals, doctors with MBBS and even master's degrees, who have turned into suicide bombers. We will unpack how this conspiracy was hatched, how Pakistan has adapted its terror game plan, how these doctors were radicalized, how Indian agencies painstakingly unraveled this terror network, and what India's response needs to be in future. But let's start with November 10th, that fateful day. On the morning of November 10th, the J&K police had already moved on key members of this so-called terror module of doctors, and they had been tracking them for weeks. It consisted of a network of professionals who were mostly doctors from Kashmir, who were suspected of planning strikes not just in the valley, but across India, with Delhi high on that list. Umar was one of the central figures, and he was supposed to be picked up in the morning, as I said earlier. He got wind of it. He spent the night in Nuh in Haryana, and that's not far from Delhi, and then drove to Faridabad, which is part of the National Capital Region, and crossed the toll gate at 1:30 a.m. that morning, in the morning. And again, with that white Hyundai i20, it is not known whether he went to his house in Faridabad, where his hospital is and where he works, but he was next spotted by public CCTV cameras at the toll gate between Faridabad and Delhi at around 8:30 a.m. in the morning. Unknown to the public and the police, at that point, the car was already loaded with explosives. Umar drove around for hours, even pausing to be in the heart of Delhi, Connaught Place, and this was around 2 p.m. Half an hour later, he was captured on camera near the Faiz-e-Ilahi Masjid opposite Turkman Gate, where he went to offer prayers. So he'd done not only drop by at Connaught Place, he also went to do prayers, and then he drove to Suneri Masjid, close to Red Fort, and parked his car in the lot there at 3:19 p.m. Remember, this is all in a day. Now picture the timeline that is happening. Early morning, he comes into Delhi, is moving around with this car full of explosives, the i20 car, and then even stops by at Connaught Place, stops by to say prayers, and then lands in Suneri Masjid, next to Red Fort, and is parked there. Now at 6:10 p.m., the J&K police post that taunting message on X, which I said earlier, you can run but can't hide. They believe they had essentially strangled the module. What they didn't realize was that Umar was almost ready, and at 6:48 p.m., 38 minutes after they had put up that X notice, CCTV showed Umar exiting the parking area from the masjid, getting into the i20 and driving towards the Red Fort. He makes a U-turn near its main gate, bringing the explosives-laden vehicle or his car as close as he can to a crowded and symbolic spot of Red Fort. It is a place from where we all know prime ministers address the nation from the ramparts, and it is a visual representation of Indian sovereignty and power, and that is what This terrorist wanted to attack as a signal, a symbol of the defiance against the Indian state. And at 6:55 p.m., at the peak hour of traffic, Umar detonates the explosives. The car is blown into fragments, and he with it. 12 people are killed, around 20 injured. These are people who just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, bystanders, motorists, ordinary citizens. Umar himself dies in this attack, but is transformed from a doctor into a suicide bomber. Remember, this wasn't just another terror attack. It shook India's security establishment because it reopened a chilling template of attacks planned for big cities using educated professionals, reminiscent of the kind of spectacular high-impact terror we saw with 26/11 in Mumbai 2008. And of course, it forced the very uncomfortable question, how does someone who has invested years of their life becoming a doctor, someone from a reasonably well-off family, turn into a fiddayin or suicide bomber? We spoke to former J&K DGP, or Director General of Police, SP Vaid, and he put it bluntly, Umar became a suicide bomber after becoming a doctor, which, by the way, is the most coveted profession in the valley, and he wasn't an outlier. He was part of a chain, and he goes on to say, Mr. Vaid goes on to say, people like him are ready to kill their own countrymen. It tells you the depth of radicalization that's taking place. This isn't about unemployment. This isn't someone picking up a gun because he has no job. This is ideology, indoctrination, a narrative so powerful that it overrides years of medical training and social respect, and that's what makes this a new and dangerous paradigm, this so-called white-collar terror. So how did India and investigation agencies that we have get to know any of this? The answer apparently lies months earlier, after Operation Sindoor. Now, if you recall, Operation Sindoor was India's response to a deadly attack in Pahalgam on April 22nd that killed 26 civilians. Indian armed forces hit Jaish-e-Mohammed's strongholds in Bawalpur, destroying its headquarters in Markaz Subhanallah, and killing at least 10 members of Masood Azhar, the chief of JM's family, including his elder sister Hawa Bibi. It also hit 4 major training camps and killed a lot of their cadre. For Pakistan's deep state and for JEM, this was a body blow. What followed then was a quiet but determined attempt at revenge. Indian intelligence agencies began to pick up chatter on encrypted telegram channels with calls for avenging the death of Masood Azhar's kin. 2 channels stood out, one run by a group which was called the Farzandan-e-Darul Ulum, Deoband, I'm not sure if I got the pronunciation right, and another operated by a Pakistan-based JM terrorist using the name Umar bin Khattab. These channels started with familiar rhetoric, began with Kashmir's Azadi and the alleged injustices by the Indian state. Then they widened the frame, started talking of global jihad, the duty to avenge wrongs, the glorification of martyrdom, the idea that the true believers must act. And this indoctrination went on for a while. Among those drawn into this online universe were Umar and cleric Maulvi Irfan Ahmed Waghe, an imam from Naugam in outer Srinagar. And he had a history, this imam had a history of helping send youth to Pakistan for training, supplying weapons and inciting stone peltings. Their radicalization, Umar and this imam, deepened after apparently they made a trip to Turkey in 2022, where Indian investigators believe that they met their Pakistani handlers. It is there, by all indications, that agency says that the idea of a professionalized, doctor-led module took shape. And when they returned, they fanned out Umar and Ganai towards Al-Falah in Faridabad. All these doctors that were named, one towards Saharanpur, other to various states, quietly building logistics, safe houses, and recruitment pipelines. Now, the first visible crack in their secrecy came not in Delhi, but on the streets of Naugam on October 18th. Their residents woke up to find threatening posters pasted on walls calling for revenge for Operation Sindoor, and the J&K police didn't treat it as just another propaganda stunt. The SSP of Srinagar, Sandeep Chakravarti, himself a qualified doctor, coincidentally who left medicine to join the police, led a team that went frame by frame through CCTV coverage in that area. They narrowed down it to 3 youth who are pasting the posters. You can get into the names of the youth, but they were all involved with the background was in stone pelting. Their interrogation led to Imam Maulvi Irfan. When he was picked up, the chain began to unravel. That's how they cracked the case. Irfan named Dr. Adil Majid Radha, then working at the famous medical super specialty hospital in Saharanpur. When police searched Radha's personal locker at his old workplace, the GMC Anandnag, they found an AK-47 rifle. This is not the sort of thing a doctor misplaces. Now, under grilling by investigating agencies, Radha gave up another name, Dr. Muzammil Shakil Ganai. And he was from Koil in Pulwama, a colleague of Umar's at the Al Fatah Hospital in Faridabad. And in a joint operation, J&K police and Haryana police raided his location and arrested him. This is Ganai. They questioned, he went into the they went into the entire investigation and looked at what all he'd done, and among that, they found that he had a hideout stocked with 358 kgs of explosives, mostly ammonium nitrate, along with detonators and improvised explosive devices making equipment. Another associate then emerged, Dr. Shaheen Saeed from Lucknow, also at Al Falah Hospital, who had custody, mind you, of another AK-47. Once she heard about Ganai's arrest, Shaheen panics and dumps the rifle behind the hospital, but it was recovered after her arrest. And then there is another character that comes into the picture, Maulana Ishtiaq, a cleric from Singar Punhana in Mewat, and he is an ideological ally and suspected to be the key player in the plan to bomb Indian cities. Now, at a house in Faridabad rented by him to Ganai, near the Al Falah hospital complex, police found something staggering: 88 sacks containing 2,500 kgs of explosives. And this was ammonium nitrate, potassium, fuel oil, detonators, batteries, timers. This was clear once they went and hit that cache that this was not a one-off plot. This was a massive industrial scale preparation for multiple attacks across India. And then came the big fish that was there. Ganai named Omar, his medical college classmate from GMC Srinagar, who also hailed from his village, as a central co-conspirator. By then, the J&K police had already put out that message that I told you on X. They had told Umar, who had escaped, you can run, but you can't hide, and were confident that they had cornered their man. Instead, Umar drove to Delhi and became, as we know, a suicide bomber. Now, investigators, after the blast and all the tragedy that happened, are left with two questions. How deep did Pakistan's hand go into these blasts? What exactly was Islamabad's new strategy or new terror strategy? This case has now gone to the National Investigating Agency, which is the prime agency to investigate these interstate crimes. And counter-terror experts are already, in India, are already converging on a view that Pakistan, or this blast has indicated that Pakistan has made a strategic shift in the way it does terror, because after Operation Sindoor and the hits on the Jaish-e-Mohammed's leadership, sending Pakistani nationals across the border for spectacular attacks had become more risky. They'd done it in Pahalgam, but they also realized it invites Indian retaliation, as we saw in Op Sindoor, and of course international scrutiny and criticism. So the ISI, the Inter-Service Intelligence Agency that Pakistan has moved to a model of homegrown professional terrorists, especially doctors, because this gives Pakistan a layer of plausible deniability. They will say, look, these are homegrown terrorists, it is not something that we fostered, and they are against the Indian state. And they chose, and they have recruited Indian citizens, particularly high-achieving professionals like doctors, because they want, or Pakistan wants to project a narrative internationally that says, look, these are not our people, these are Indians, Kashmiri doctors, they are so disillusioned with the Indian state that they are blowing themselves up. And you target a symbol like the Red Fort, you use a Kashmiri doctor, and suddenly the story Pakistan pushes is about alienated Kashmiris, not cross-border terrorism. That's exactly what they wanted. And retired Colonel Vivek Chadha, who is with the IDSA, the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, points out the clever combination that Pakistan has used, which is to have highly qualified professionals like doctors who are unlikely to draw suspicion, targeting not daily life in Kashmir, but a symbol of Indian power in the heart of Delhi. The aim is psychological shock and a narrative advantage with deniability built in. Former J&K DGP, Mr. R.R. Swain, who I spoke to, adds another crucial point. The involvement of doctors and other professionals demolish the lazy argument that terrorism is all about poverty or unemployment. These are people from stable, often well-educated middle-class backgrounds. They don't pick up guns because they have no jobs. They pick them up because they've been ideologically weaponized. So now let's look at where does all this leave India and what India needs to do. On one hand, let's credit the Modi government that there has been a measured response. Both Prime Minister Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah have publicly said that the masterminds and perpetrators will be brought to justice, but the government has resisted the temptation to instantly and loudly point fingers at Pakistan before building the case against them. Experts like Adil Rashid at the IDSA, whom I spoke to, see this as a course correction because after Operation Sindoor, where India may not have fully anticipated the international backlash and the tendency to treat every India-Pakistan clash as a two-sided conflict is irrespective of Pakistan's terror record. So India was actually disappointed by what happened and the way the international community viewed the Operation Sindoor as well as the Pahalgam attacks and kind of made it look like both the sides had a point of view, whereas all of us knew that this was a heinous crime committed by Pakistan and its terror setup that was there. And let's also not forget there's also a changing geopolitical angle with Field Marshal Asim Munir consolidating power in Pakistan's entire establishment setup. He's become the chief of defense forces and therefore commands now all the armed forces. And we can see that the US-Pakistan relationship under Donald Trump has acquired a strategic value, and therefore there is a real risk for India that hasty, high-visibility strikes could isolate India diplomatically. And Munir, Field Marshal Munir of Pakistan, some analysts believe is actively trying to provoke India into a sharp escalatory response so that Pakistan can play the victim, cry wolf, and drag in international mediators. That's why many Indian security experts warn against what they call performative militarism, which is big, flashy operations that look good on TV but don't fundamentally change Pakistan's calculus. Instead, what these experts argue for is a long-term strategy of what they call escalation dominance, which is a mix of repeatable kinetic options, meaning using force, apart from economic and diplomatic pressure, and of course covert measures that steadily raise the cost for Pakistan while avoiding the nuclear threshold and international intervention. That's one of our big worries. We don't want it to end up into a nuclear conflagration, and that's what the world doesn't want. Now, at the same time, India cannot ignore the internal dimensions of this particular problem that has cropped up, and Lieutenant General D.P. Pandey, speaking to my colleague, points out that the real challenge lies not only in neutralizing gun-wielding militants, but in dismantling what he calls the white-collar terrorists who create, fund, and sustain these networks from behind the scenes. He actually talks of them as terror factories, the new terror factories that are there, the imams, the doctors, the professionals who radicalize, provide finance, and even hide operatives. These, as I had mentioned, General Pandey believes could become the new factories of terror, and focusing only on the foot soldiers is no longer enough. What that means for all police forces and investigative agencies is sharper intelligence on professional networks, not just the usual suspects. Let's not forget that there needs to be serious monitoring of radical clerics and telegram ecosystems, also scrutiny of posting of doctors from sensitive areas into major Indian cities without resorting to crude profiling that alienates an entire community. We must also remember in terms of the security, that there has to be concerted action, because we do know that there could be other modules that are there, exactly like the Faridabad module, and therefore, not only must the government and various states, the central government in various states must go out and ensure that these modules are demolished or nipped at the bud, and should not, as happened in the Faridabad module, end up in a bomb blast of a kind that injures or kills innocent civilians. And then let's look finally at the fact at Kashmir. And here again, there might be gaps in the governmental approach, which needs, particularly in terms of governance, and this needs to be plugged so that there are fewer openings for Pakistan to exploit. As DGP Swain told me, if you offer people in the valley a peaceful, enabling environment, most of them will get busy earning a livelihood and building a life with dignity. They will not become cannon fodder for Pakistani games. That in turn brings us to the political question: restoring statehood in Jammu and Kashmir and a credible roadmap for democratic representation in Jammu and Kashmir. On this, we already have an election. Now the next demand is that they wanted statehood, and here there is a mixed debate on it. Some caution that we shouldn't be rushing to giving statehood to Jammu and Kashmir. Others, experts, argue that there should be a clear timeline would help undercut separatist narratives. Whatever it is, whichever solution you head to, it is clear that security, development, and political outreach have to move together. India has begun to adapt through Operation Sindoor, through careful investigations, through quieter diplomacy. But this new era of white-collar terror will test our institutions, our politics, and our social fabric in ways we're only now beginning to understand. For now, what we know is this: when the JK police posted, "You can run, but you can't hide," they were sending a message to one man. After the blast in Delhi, that message needs to be extended to an entire ecosystem, from Jaish handlers in Pakistan's Bawalpur to indoctrinators in Turkey to radicalized professionals in Faridabad and Saharanpur. They can run, they can hide behind degrees, white coats, and respectable addresses, and therefore, if India has to secure its future, they cannot be allowed to hide forever. For more details, you can read the cover story in the latest issue of India Today. It's an in-depth cover story on the new white-collar terror that I have jointly penned with my colleagues Pradeep Sagar in Delhi and Kaleem Jalani in Srinagar. Thank you for being with me in this episode of Nothing But the Truth. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next episode. Nothing But the Truth.